Good morning, San Diego. Another edition of the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each and every Sunday morning from 8 to 10 on San Diego's number one sports station, 97.3 The Fan. I'm Braden Surprenant. We'll take you up to the EcoWater SoCal Padres pregame show with Sam Levitt, leading you into the rubber match between the San Diego Padres and the Cleveland Guardians, live in Cleveland, as the Padres will try to win the first series of the ceremonial second half. Padres have been well into the second half over the last couple of weeks or so with the amount of games that they have played after starting the season in Korea. And the Padres' schedule for next year has come out as well, and we might have time to talk about that a little bit. We talked about that this week when it came out on Annie and Elston. But the ceremonial second half for the San Diego Padres, seems to me it started off a little bit like the first half of the season. And we're going to talk more about that as well. We're going to talk about the first half in review for the San Diego Padres. We're going to talk about the last couple of nights for the Padres in Cleveland. Dylan Cease made history yesterday. We'll talk about what exactly he did, get a little second half preview for Major League Baseball, and then some updates on Fernando and Joe Musgrove, and we'll see where they play into a trade deadline conversation with the Padres. And we're going to talk about that. I've been talking about that for the last couple of months. I have different opinions on, trading at the deadline, depending on where you're at. And a lot of it has to do, I think, with the window that you have. I think every team is unique on the sense of where they are at in terms of their minor leagues, where are they at in terms of their star players at the big league level, on top of where you are in the standings. I think like the Pirates being a half game in front of the Padres right now, they are still a little bit different than the Padres, even though they have a little bit better of a record. Because they're not ready. They're not ready to make that jump yet. They're still a couple of years away, maybe a year away, and you don't know what they're going to do with their kind of top pitchers going into the second half of the season. So I think it's a little bit different. And we'll talk more about that later on. But let's talk about this Padres team that has now started the ceremonial second half looking a lot like what they look like in the first half of the season. That would be inconsistently consistent. They are consistently inconsistent. That's mediocre. They are a mediocre ball club. They are what they are. With the win last night, they're back to one game over 500. They've played 101 games this season. They are 51-50. And aside from winning 12 of 14 at some point during the first half, which was about almost a month ago, they have relatively played around 500 ball for the majority of the season. Have they looked better doing it? I would say so. Has it been more exciting? I would also say so. And of course, we're talking about the comparison of last year. But they are what they are. And they're a 500 team. I mean, what's the saying? If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. I'm pretty sure you can have different descriptions of a duck in that particular case. Yesterday, I went to a wedding. It was my sister's best friend's wedding that she has known since elementary school all the way through. Went to the same elementary school in high school. And then, obviously different for college, been friends for a long time. This couple, John and Nicole, shout out to them, the newlyweds, who are probably asleep right now up in Carlsbad at the hotel where the reception was at. Two people that met when they were in 5th grade, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 4th or 5th grade. St. Michael's in Poway. It was a great wedding. It was a great reception. Big thank you to the Tabares and Leone family for including me in that wedding. Had a great time. But my dad, because we all went together, the whole family was invited. I mean, think about that for a second on the perspective of weddings. I mean, most of the time, you don't really have a lot of the entire family being invited to certain weddings. Again, this is not a family wedding. This is my sister's best friend. So I guess you could say family for an instance, if you will. But very nice of them to invite our entire family. So we decided to all ride together to the ceremony at around 2 o'clock. It was at St. Michael's Church in Poway, where I went to elementary school, kindergarten through 8th grade. So it was cool to go back to the stomping grounds. And we got to not even like the halfway point of the drive. And it was like, I'm going to remind you, the wedding started at 2. And we got to Scripps Poway Parkway and Pomerado Road, heading on Pomerado Road north. We got to that light at about 1:56. And it turned into the conversation of, why are we late again? My dad has a saying for that. We are considered the bride and casket crew. I think you could think about that from your own perspective of what that means. The bride and casket crew. What does that mean exactly? That means we arrive and go up the aisle to go sit in our seats when the bride or the casket for funerals is also making its way to the altar. We are the bride and casket crew. And so yesterday, we're sitting there at the light, and there's a slight argument about why we were late. Now, my mom, bless her heart, she is not really on time for really anything. I mean anything. And a lot of the times, it's the fact that she thinks she could squeeze extra things in before getting places. Trying to use the most of her time. Value that. What's the point of showing up early if you can't park? All this other stuff. Usually gets lucky with a lot of those things. She made the claim that it wasn't her fault this time, and my dad responded with, I am never late to anything, and you are late to everything. So, when we got to the wedding, and my sister, who is in the wedding, sees us walking up as she starts to get lined up and starts freaking out like, come on, go to your seats. It was the debate of who was the reason they were late. Now, my mom blamed my brother for being late, and my dad said, well, you know your mother. And so even though my sister wasn't there because we had to meet her there because she had to be there early, she just assumed that because of consistency and you are what you are, that my mom was the reason why we were late. Here's how I relate this back to the Padres, and it's totally true. The Padres could say everything they want. Mike Schilt can say whatever he wants about how he's got a bunch of gamers, he's got a bunch of grinders, and all it's going to take is a couple of weeks, and we're right there, and yada, yada, yada. And the thing is, he could say all those things, but at the end of the day, you are what your record is. And your record has told us that you are a 500 ball club, and that's exactly what they are. The San Diego Padres can say what they want about showing up early and being on time for events. But as I see it based on their record, they're a bride and casket crew. Now, that being said, you can always change, right? I mean, the next wedding, we could be on time. We have the opportunity to change that. We have the opportunity to maybe get ready a little bit earlier, to go sit down in a seat before the bride shows up. But at this point in time, we are what we are. We are the bride and casket crew. The Padres are what they are. They're a 500 ball club. They have really, really good games. Last night was a great showing of what the Padres could be. And yet the night before, we saw the exact opposite of that. I find it kind of fitting that this Padres team, to start the ceremonial second half, right? The games that are after the wild card would be the ceremonial second half. I find it ironic that they lost the first game 7-0 to go back to 500. And then they win the second game 7-0. So in the second half, the Padres have scored 7 runs. They've allowed 7 runs. They have 1 win. They have 1 loss, which equals what they basically did in the first half of the season. The only difference is they had 1 extra win than loss. I mean, what? You couldn't have asked for a more perfect start to a second half of a season for a Padres team that is consistently trying to tell us everything that they are currently not, when in reality, they're a 500 club. They are what they are. I've made the comparisons multiple times to that former NFL team we had in town. And anytime I say the Chargers name, people freak out. Look, I'm not a Chargers fan anymore. They're just like any other team. I don't hate watch. I don't really pay attention to what they're doing. If I see them on TV, I'm looking to see if I got anybody in the game that's a fantasy player. And that's about it. But how many times, San Diego, would you watch this team play? And I'm talking about the Chargers for a second. Would you watch them go out there and dominate a team that's really good? Right? I mean, they would own the Indianapolis Colts all the time. They used to own Peyton Manning. If the Chargers played the Colts on Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, whatever type of primetime game, that was a Chargers dub 9 times out of 10. They owned them. But in those same years, they would drop games to like the Jacksonville Jaguars. They'd lose these clunker games to the Raiders. They'd lose these clunker games to some bad teams from the NFC. And every time you would hear the conversation, you know what? The Chargers might be the best 6-6 team in the NFL. They might be the best 7-7 team in the NFL. You know what? They're 8-8. They snuck into the playoffs. They might be the best 8-8 team in the NFL. You know what that's called? That's called mediocrity. Mediocrity is the team that can always go out there and show signs of being a really good ball club and beating the Dodgers more times than not and winning the season series against the Atlanta Braves and the Cincinnati Reds and the Chicago Cubs and some of the contenders in the National League, while also getting beat up by the Colorado Rockies. It's a mediocre team. That's what they are. So I think from perspective of this kind of conversation, and I'm not saying they're not in the playoffs, and I'm not saying they shouldn't trade and acquire pieces at the trade deadline. I just think it's time to just basically admit who they are, a 500 team. That's what they are. They could say whatever they want about what they think they are. That's what they are. You are what your record says you are. So they are a 500 team, and I think that's how we need to view them until you make any type of deal or any type of trade or any type of roster move that gets some guys back from the injured list. I think that changes things. And right now, for the Padres, being around 500 is going to keep you part of the conversation for a long time. I mean, look at the standings. You got the Cardinals, you got the Mets, the Diamondbacks, the Pirates, the Padres, the Reds, Giants, and Cubs, all within 5 games of each other, from the Cardinals down to the Cubs. Now, the Nationals are just a half game behind that, 5.5 games back. And it's a tight race for the National League wild card division or wild card play, whatever, wild card spot. Teams are going to get hot. Teams are going to fall behind. But being around 500 is probably going to keep you in the thick of things. We talked about this on the show during this week on Andy and Elston. There's been a couple of times. I mean, you go through it. I thought the Padres at the beginning of the year were going to win 84 games. I think that's well enough. I think that's plenty to make it to the postseason. I think it's going to be a lot easier to make the postseason with the expanded playoffs and playing everybody and the way the National League is. I mean, 82 might get you in. 83 might get you in. So from that perspective, I think you need to help improve this club still. And we got some other topics about that we want to talk about. And I think it leads with Dylan Cease and what he accomplished yesterday. He accomplished history for the Padres yesterday What is that history? We're going to talk about that when we come back and why it could help this 500 ball club out down the stretch. I'm Braden Surprenant. We're just getting started. It's the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each and every Sunday morning, leading you up to the EcoWater SoCal Padres pregame show on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Welcome back to the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each and every Sunday morning. Sun breaking through the marine layer to get the morning started here in a beautiful July 21st. Summer's just flying by. Padres season's just flying by. It's going to be the fall in just a little bit of time. I mean, we got high school football starting in about a week and a half. High school football practice starts August 1st, the first day you could start practice. That would be not this Thursday, but the following Thursday. And it is go time for football season in America's finest city and throughout the rest of the country on top of Padres baseball. I mean, August, September is kind of my favorite. It's now my favorite time of the year when you got the Padres going, right? And it's a lot different than when I was growing up with the Padres, where it seemed like the season was over in June. I didn't know they played this long as seasons. And now with the Padres in the thick of things, an exciting team. Mix that with some football, some college football, some high school football. The NFL, of course, for all of you out there that still watch the NFL. I do watch the NFL. I don't have a team anymore. I've had some people that, you know, they ask me, like, well, what's your favorite NFL team now? I'm like, I really don't have one. I just watch the NFL. I mean, I watch Red Zone. Watch every single game on Sunday instead of just one team with commercial breaks. It's a different viewing experience I have compared to Saturdays when I watch college football all day. Kind of focus on a couple of games in my own red zone. I'm Braden Surprenant. It's the Braden Surprenant Show. We're here live and local each and every Sunday morning. If you haven't done so on YouTube yet, go ahead and hit the like button. Help the algorithm out with the Braden Surprenant Show to be able to spread this amongst all of our YouTube fans. We are no longer on Twitter for some reason, because on X you have to be a premium member to stream live, which is kind of lame, but it is what it is. So let's get everybody back to YouTube. We are on Facebook. Shout out to the couple of you that are watching on Facebook. I know Joe in New Jersey's watching on Facebook. He was. Manuel on Facebook. Shout out to y'all. We're on my YouTube account as well as the fans. I want to talk about Dylan Cease. Let's talk about Dylan Cease for a second. Dylan Cease was lights out last night. Guy was incredible. Guy was looking like the player that the Padres, why they acquired him at the beginning of the year. So last night, Dylan Cease went 7 innings, 1 hit, 1 walk, and 10 punch-outs, which added to his start before, where he had a similar stretch of 6 innings, 1 hit, and 11 strikeouts. Dylan Cease is turning back into the ace that the Padres expected him to be when they acquired him at the beginning of the season. In fact, his last 2 games, he is the first Padres pitcher ever to have back-to-back starts with 1 or fewer hits, no runs, and 10-plus punch-outs. Guy's been one of a kind the last couple of weeks, or last couple of starts, I should say. That is a major upgrade to this Padres team as we start getting closer to trade deadline time, because if the Padres could get Dylan Cease back to ace form, and if they could get Joe Musgrove back in some capacity, the rotation looks a hell of a lot better than it did about a week and a half ago. You acquire one pitcher, and now all of a sudden you got Cease, you got Musgrove, you got King, Waldron, who has been, quite frankly, unbelievable with his knuckleball. You acquire one more pitcher, you're in pretty good shape. Randy Vasquez could be a long relief guy. It's a lot better than it was before. But Dylan Cease, outstanding performance yesterday, and a good overall win for the San Diego Padres. I mean, hopefully they can build off of that last night into today for the rubber match against the Cleveland Guardians, who is one of the best teams in Major League Baseball. Cleveland comes in today the second best team in the American League and the third best team in all of Major League Baseball, as they have a better winning percentage than the Los Angeles Dodgers. A .608 winning percentage this year for Cleveland. They're 59-38, and they haven't lost a home series, I think, all year. They've only lost 12 games at home all season. The Padres beat them 7-0 last night. This would be a huge start to a road trip that's a very difficult road trip for the San Diego Padres. Padres have 11 game. I think it's 11 game stretch. It's a 9-game stretch, which they play. It's 9 games in 11 days. They got Cleveland now. They'll have a Monday off tomorrow. 3 against the Nationals, 3 against Baltimore, and then they welcome the Los Angeles Dodgers to Petco Park for, by the way, the final time of 2024. This will be the final time the Padres play the Dodgers at home in 2024. They'll have one more series against LA in September, the final week of the season, and that's it. That is it against LA. And the Padres have a winning record against LA so far this year. But if they could go into Cleveland and get another win and take 2 out of 3 from the Guardians, we'll see what they do against the Nationals this week. They did pretty well against them at home, and I'm sure the Nationals will be ready to go after the fireworks that ensued here in San Diego. And then you got to take a tough Baltimore team on. If you could take the tough Baltimore team on after already winning 2 series on the road trip, you had a good road trip. You pick up a couple games above 500 again, and you get ready for a homestand against LA and the Colorado Rockies, which could be tough for multiple reasons. Probably more so on the Colorado Rockies side of things. If you want to join the show today, you could join in the chat on YouTube. Got a lot of people in there. Good morning to all of y'all. You could also do it the old-fashioned way and get to the phones. 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. Let's get out to New Jersey. Mitch wants to call in the show. Mitch, what's going on? You're on with Braden Surprenant.
Braden, how you doing?
Doing well, Mitch.
It's cooled down. It's been a good summer. It's flying. I agree with you. I think August, September, I love college football more than the NFL, and I keep track of all the high school talent is out there in football. Dangerous sport, still like the baseball and basketball, but heck of a talent. It's kind of early. Starting practice already?
Starting practice on August 1st, and last year, Mitch, we started on July 30th, starting earlier and earlier.
When they get out of school, May 21st?
Yeah.
When they get out of school?
I don't know when they get out of school. Some schools start a lot earlier now. I mean, I can't imagine. Sometimes, I mean, there's some schools out here that will play a high school football game before they even get into school.
Wow. Keep them busy during the summer. The guy the audience. He's having a pretty good. I think it was 4 in the top 10 MVP for Cleveland this year. We should pick up 2 pitchers back and Tatis, and it will be okay at least for wild card. Dodgers are probably going to trade soon. They're pretty desperate.
Mitch, I'm losing you. But I got some of the gist out of that. Go out there, get a starting pitcher, which would be nice. Obviously, the Padres could use pitching, and more pitching. They're going to get Joe Musgrove back, hopefully. We'll have a report on that in the 9 o'clock hour. Mentions the Dodgers. The Dodgers, it's pretty interesting to see what this Dodgers team has turned into. And again, they're still leading the division. They're 8 games in front of the Padres. They're 7 games in front of the Diamondbacks after the Padres lost on Friday. But it's interesting on ESPN, they had an article. I'm not going to spend too much time on the Dodgers, but they had an article about from super team to Swiss cheese, 4 ways MLB insiders say depleted Dodgers can improve at the trade deadline. They got a lot of holes. And they got a lot of problems in their starting rotation. I mean, you think the Padres need some starters. The Dodgers need some starters big time. And there are a lot of teams that need starting pitching coming up at the trade deadline. So the addition of Joe Musgrove, which I'm still holding my breath on that, because not only does he have to come back, he has to be able to come back, not get re-injured. Hopefully he's good and ready to go. That could be a major addition to the Padres rotation. And to get Dylan Cease back to form of being an ace, I think is good news for San Diego, where you might be able to just get one starting pitcher and not cost you half your farm system in order to do so, because of teams like LA that need multiple starters and other teams that are contenders that always like to add an additional starter. I mean, Philadelphia is one of those teams that is like one player away from being an unbelievable team, and they're already a really good team. I think the same thing could be said about Baltimore. Start looking at some of these teams in in contention here that lead the field. LA, even though they are the fourth best team in Major League Baseball, they got a lot of holes, and everybody after that's got a lot of holes. It's a pretty evenly matched year aside from the top teams in the American League and the National League, with the Phillies kind of being a level above everybody else. Baltimore seems to be at that level. Yankees came back down to earth at the end of the first half, and Cleveland's looked really good as well. But we'll see what the trade deadline has in store, and we'll see what the Padres decide to do. But good phone call from Mitch. Wish his phone worked a little bit better. When we come back, we're going to do a little first half in review, finish up what the Padres did in the first half before getting you a second half preview. Coming up in the 9 o'clock hour, update on Fernando Tatis Jr. and Joe Musgrove. Could they be the best trade deadline pickups for the Padres? We'll talk about all that in just a little bit. I'm Braden Surprenant. This is the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each and every Sunday morning on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Braden Surprenant Show live and local each and every Sunday morning from 8 to 10. Thanks again for making our morning a part of yours. I'm Braden Surprenant. We are streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, my YouTube page at B_SURP. Be sure to subscribe, as well as 97 Through the Fans YouTube page. Thanks again for all of you joining us. Thanks again for all of you guys in the chat this morning. Helps us out a big part. If you haven't done so already, give us a like on the YouTube page. Like this video. Helps out with pushing it out to more people to try to spread the word that we are here each and every Sunday morning. Was talking before about kind of recapping the first half. We'll get to that in just a little second. We want to get back to your phone calls as well. Make sure to follow me on social media accounts at B_SURP. You can follow me on X. You can follow me on Instagram. You can follow me on TikTok. And, of course, subscribe to the YouTube page. 833-288-0973. 833-288-0973. We'll get back to the phone calls. Kathy in L.A. wants to weigh in. Kathy, good morning to you. Happy Sunday.
Hey, Braden. Can you imagine what our record would be if we had re-signed Lugo and Waka, considering how well they're doing for the Royals?
Yeah, I mean, that would have been nice at the rotation. I know money was kind of an issue with that, with the competitive balance tax. But if you had those two guys in the rotation still, with everybody you currently have, yes, it would be a lot better of a roster. I mean, a lot better of a record. It would be a lot better of a record if they just beat half the bad teams that they lost to this year. They'd probably be like 5 games out of first place.
True. I mean, it's insane that we have the hitting. Our pitching's been very shaky. Hopefully, like you were saying, that Musgrove's going to come back soon and that he's going to be able to be as well as he was back in 2021. And hopefully everything's going well for you, Darvish. I mean, obviously we're never going to know, and people that think that we have 1,000% right to know what's going on with him and his family are like, okay, whatever. But, I think we can make it to the playoffs. Hopefully Tatis will be back shortly. And if we just lock down some pitching, I think we'll be pretty good.
I think so as well, Kathy. And again, I appreciate the phone call. And my thing with this team and the trades at the deadline. I mean, I've heard some people on these airwaves say, like, look, until they prove that they're a good team, we're not going to trade for anybody. For what? For what? If you want to see something very interesting, you can go to Fangraphs, and they've ranked the top 31 prospects in the Padres organization. They updated this, I think, last Sunday, if I'm not mistaken, with the draft and everything. So Fangraphs, they ranked the top 31 prospects in the Padres organization. And their ranking's different than MLB.com's. I mean, Jackson Merrill's the number 1 ranked player in their farm system, followed by Ethan Salas, Leodalis DeVries, Dylan Lesko, and Robbie Snelling. And with that ranking, they have given out an estimated time of arrival, which a lot of them are later than what MLB.com has put out. And they also give everybody a value, what is called a fan value, or future value. And with that future value, it determines what they are doing based on WAR, or what they're expected to do based on WAR, and what type of a player they are expected to be. It's on the 20/80 scale that scouts use to evaluate players. They do the 20/80 rule, 20/80 scale, if you will. And so they map this out based on WAR and get their scouting scale. So with this scouting scale that they have, and I'll just kind of put it from this perspective, anything, 20's not good, right? And then like all the way up to 80, which would be great. So from a hitting perspective, they label it like this: if you're a 20 on the list, you're an organizational guy. You're going to be in the minor leagues for a while, right? You're just part of the organization. Chances of making it to the pros pretty slim. A 30 on the scale is an up and down. 40's a bench piece. 45 low end regular player / platoon player. A 50 is an average everyday player. A 55 is an above average regular player, a 60 as an all-star, a 70 as a top 10 player overall, and if any prospect you have is an 80, he would be considered a top 5 player in baseball. And again, it's all associated with WAR, right? And Fangraphs WAR, which a lot of people think is the law on a lot of different things. And it's a good evaluation to overall kind of get a general sense of what a player's value is. Everybody's got their own system for doing this, but for Fangraphs, they have their formula, if you will, to determine their WAR, and then this is how they do their scouting scale. Why am I getting to this? Well, I mean, if you start looking at some of the players on this list and some of these, top prospects in the Padres organization, right? Players that a lot of fans don't want to trade away because that is the future. And everybody was so worried about trading away some of the pieces for Juan Soto. I still think it was a trade that worked out. But guess what? You never know what guys are going to develop. You never know what guys are going to do. I mean, everybody was talking about... I still think James Wood's going to be a really good player. But James Wood has come back down to earth since being in the big leagues. He's only had 61 at-bats. And he got off to a hot start. But now he's hitting 230 with a 604 OPS. I still think James Wood's going to be really good. He might be the guy that the Padres let get away. But unless James Wood has a better career than Juan Soto, it's a justified trade. And as much as you would love to have James Wood on the team now, it's hindsight 2020. If the Padres won a World Series the last 2 years, or one of the last 2 years with Juan Soto, nobody would even care what James Wood was doing, but they didn't. So now all of a sudden we got to worry about things that we can no longer control. Who cares? He's gone now. He's not part of your organization anymore. You could sit there and say whatever, what if, like, what about this? What happens if this? I mean, you can play the what if game all you want. He's not on the team anymore. I mean, there's so many people that have said that about the All-Star game. Well, look at all the Padres, the former Padres that are on different teams. I mean, and this is not talking about Kathy. I mean, it'd be great if they had some of the players that they had last year on this team, but they're not. In a perfect world of this, like everything in the future is going to be perfect, and saying that, oh, we could have had all these guys. You don't know that. You don't know if you could have had all of these players at one time. Just because right now, based on their contracts and plugging and placing, you think you could have that, you never know. You never know. It's hindsight 2020. So let's talk about this rating scale real quick, just to give you a general idea of what Fangraphs thinks of the Padres prospects coming up and whether or not you think you should trade them. Because I think it's a very interesting topic. I mean, again, we're not down there evaluating these players like the Padres are. And I brought this up multiple times. The Padres traded C.J. Abrams because they liked what they had in Jackson Merrill. That's part of it, too. You're not going to be able to hang on to all of these prospects. You're going to have to trade some of them to try to get playing time at the major league level. So they talked about Jackson Merrill being the number one prospect in the Padres organization. I don't know how much longer that's going to last. He's been part of the major league team for a long time. His number is a 60. They gave him a 60 on the scouting scale for future value. That would be an all-star. Checks out. Jackson Merrill's an all-star this year. That goes to a 3.4 to a 4.9 WAR. That's a pretty good player. There's only one other player on the roster that is expected to have a future value of a 60, which according to Fangraphs would be an all-star, and that would be Ethan Salas. And I've said multiple times, and I think a lot of other people on the station have said multiple times, and I think the Padres organization believes in this as well. They're not going to trade away Ethan Salas. He is a future all-star according to most metrics and scouting. And if he is a future all-star, unless you're getting a Juan Soto, Shohei Ohtani level player, which they are not, and there are no players like that out there currently, there's no reason to trade Ethan Salas. There is nobody worth trading Ethan Salas for. He is an all-star. Keep him. Again, I think you should trade anytime you can get with any of these organizational players to try to make your major league club better, because at the end of the day, the major league club needs to be the best club, not the minor league club. But I'm not saying you trade Ethan Salas for Garrett Crochet. That would be stupid. That would be stupid. And the Padres aren't going to do that. And if they do that, we'll have a different conversation. But That's not going to be part of the deal. The number 3rd ranked prospect of the Padres organization, Leodalis DeVries. Again, he's 17 years old, about to be 18 years old. He's not even a legal adult yet. He got a 50. That would be an average everyday player. He could improve that. He could probably get his way up to a 60 on the scouting scale. But as of right now, how they evaluate, he is a 50. He is an average everyday player. Again, it's kind of like the recruiting rankings for high school football. When you talk about DeVries. DeVries is 17. And we have all these high school recruiting rankings all the time. The 4-star, 5-star, 3-star. All of those are determined by what people at 24/7 Sports or the different outlets think that high school kid is going to do in the National Football League. That is a wild guess, by the way. To guess what you think a current 17, 18-year-old could potentially do in the future in the National Football League at the highest level of football. I mean, think about how asinine that sounds. Think about the guessing you have to do to put together the stars for recruits. I mean, are you willing to put money on that? Are you willing to gamble that? Imagine somebody going to Vegas and going like, I think this guy is going to be this level player in the National Football League as I see him as a 17-year-old. I mean, it is almost impossible to try to number that. But you start looking at some of these scouting scales for this team. The number 4 guy is Dylan Lesko. He got a 50. 50 for a pitcher is a number 4 starter. An approximate 4.00 fielding independent pitching, a 1.8 WAR to a 2.5 WAR. Number 4 starter. He projects to be a number 4 starter. If you trade him for starting pitching that has already proven that they are better than a number 4 starter, that is help for the Padres. He is projected again to be a number 4 according to Fangraphs. Take that for what it's worth. Dylan Lesko is projected to be a number 4 starter according to their metrics. Robbie Snelling, the number 5th prospect in the organization, he got a 40+. That's a number 4 to a number 5 starter in Major League Baseball. That's what he projects to be. That's a 1 WAR to a 1.7 WAR. That is your 5th best prospect. So as much as we want to say, like, well, this Padres team, man, they gotta prove that they're winners before we start making deals. Why? You could trade these guys. I mean, what do you think about Adam Mazur? Adam Mazur, according to Fangraphs, is the 7th best prospect in the organization. On MLB.com, he's the 5th best prospect in the organization. People want that guy run out of town. I know it's early. He hasn't pitched a lot in Major League Baseball. He's probably not ready yet. But Fangraphs has Adam Mazur as a number 4 or number 5 projected starter. How many of those guys do you want to keep when you can trade for young, controllable pitching? I think you have to phrase this all the time because people just assume that you're going to trade your best player. And everybody always thinks that these minor leaguers are going to be like number 1s, 2s, 3 starters. And you just assume that you're going to trade those players for rentals. I don't think so. To me, with the Padres in buying, I think you need to trade some of these prospects that I just mentioned, not named Ethan Salas. Obviously, they're not going to trade Jackson Merrill. But you start looking at 3 through 10, you could trade those prospects for young, controllable pieces that are on failing teams that don't fit their window of opportunity or their window to win, and you still have depth, and you're still not spending a lot of money, and by the time those players leave the organization, you have a new crop of players coming up through the minor leagues. That is what A.J. Preller has done. Has he missed on some? Yeah, but so has everybody else. I mean, the Dodgers have missed on guys all the time. The most notable one is Yordan Alvarez. I mean, they traded Yordan Alvarez for basically nothing. So it's going to happen. I know they've had better ones that they've kept on to, but I've gone through this a couple of times with some advanced stats. And the thing is, the Padres, in reality, have kept some of the best prospects in their organization. Whether they acquired those prospects in a deal or they drafted those prospects or signed them, the ones that have done the best, according to WAR and according to OPS Plus and ERA Plus, and the ones that totally evaluate overall players, the Padres have kept the best two players in their organization as they come up. The only exception, really, being C.J. Abrams, who we don't really know fully about, but he was an all-star this year. I think that's warranted. And James Wood, who started off strong and has come back down to earth a little bit, but again, he's only had 61 at-bats in Major League Baseball. It's not about just the wins and losses. It's about where you are in the standings, and it's about where your window of opportunity and your window to win is. And your window to win, unfortunately, despite the roster having some holes, is right now because of the contracts you already signed. I've been saying that for a long time now. Start going through that list of players. Top 31 players, according to Fangraphs, in the Padres organization. Next one on the list was Randy Vasquez. Randy Vasquez is projected to be a 4th or 5th starter, according to Fangraphs. I think maybe he could be a 3 starter. I think he's got some pretty good stuff. He's just learning how to pitch. Francis Pena. He is a relief pitcher. He is projected to be a guy that is a bullpen piece that's going to give you a 0 to a 0.9 WAR. Isaiah Lowe, starting pitcher. He's projected to be he's a 40. He's a back-end starter. Projected to have a fielding independent pitching close to 5. I mean, these are not like superstar guys. They got Eggy Rosario, Tisa Ornelas, Graham Pauley. I mean, they all rank out to be bench players in Major League Baseball. It's okay to part ways with some bench players. And I know the overall goal is to try to save some money, and those young guys balance it out. But what I'm telling you is you can acquire those players from bad teams right now, and you're still accomplishing the same thing. Instead of having bench players, you have starters and guys that have proven to do it at the Major League level. About 2 segments left on the Braden Surprenant Show. We're going to talk about the second half when we come back. Live and local, San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Final hour of the Braden Surprenant Show. We are live. We are local each and every Sunday morning. Even when I have weddings to go to the night before, other different things throughout my life. Get that boost of energy when the alarm goes off at 6 a.m. to come out down here and talk with all of you about Padres baseball on a Sunday morning. Speaking of Padres baseball, they're coming up soon with the EcoWater SoCal Padres pregame show with Sam Levitt coming up at about 9:40. So we only got really another 39 minutes with y'all before we pass it along to Sam Levitt and Frank Marchese and company with the EcoWater SoCal Padres pregame show. Leading you into Padres baseball, rubber match against the Cleveland Guardians. Padres could really use a series win against Cleveland. They've done a pretty good job against some contenders this season. And we're going to get to those in just a little bit when it comes to the second half. I see a lot of people talking about in the chat about the Paul Skeens, Jackson Merrill Rookie of the Year conversation. Jackson Merrill's had a tough July. He's got to turn it around. He's going to hit that wall eventually. And I agree with that. To me, I mean, that award is Paul Skeens to lose. And I am going to tell you right now, I don't care how many games he plays in. People love that guy right now. He is the darling of Major League Baseball as of right now because of what he can do on the mound, and that's the big reason why he started the National League All-Star Game. And again, people vote for these awards, and they're going to vote for Paul Skeens. 100% they're going to vote for Paul Skeens. So I'll take that for what it's worth. I mean, you know what? If Jackson Merrill wins a Rookie of the Year award, great. He already made an All-Star game. He's already proven that he could be up here in Major League Baseball. He might go through a tough August where he comes back down to earth, but he has done everything that you could have asked him to do this year for the San Diego Padres. I want to get back to your phone calls. You want to weigh in on the Padres? What do you think? 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. We're talking about some of the values that the Padres' top prospects have and what they project to be. And to be honest with you, aside from two of those players, and one of them are really being in Major League Baseball, there ain't anybody on that list that's just, going to be an ace or an all-star. You have one that was already an all-star in Jackson Merrill. I guess you could throw him out and basically make it a top 30 list. And then after that, it's solid everyday Major League player, Leo Dallas DeVries, who, again, is just turning 18, probably is later this year. And you got potential future all-star in Ethan Salas. And after that, everybody is just kind of a fourth and fifth starter, starting pitching-wise, or a role player on a Major League Baseball team. That's, again, according to Fangraphs. That's why I don't mind trading some of these guys. Let's get back to the phone, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. Let's get out to Brandon in El Cajon. Brandon, what's going on? How's your Sunday doing?
Oh, it's just a little warm out here, but so far so good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. What do you got for me today?
Yeah, I just am listening to your show. It's a great show. I like listening to it on Sunday. I got to disagree with you, though. Do you really want to see A.J. Preller trade away more people? The Padres need to take a look in the mirror and fire that guy. 10 years of this, and nothing has changed. It's the same as it ever was.
Well, it is the same as it ever was, but at this point, I mean, this season he's done a pretty good job for what he has been given. I mean, you had multiple opportunities to fire him before, and you didn't. And so far this year, for what he has done, there's nothing really justifiable in firing him unless he doesn't make the postseason. Yeah, I mean, he's in charge, and here's the deal. Like, you want to make the team better. And not every one of these players is going to be some perennial all-star that I think a lot of fans think they're going to be because of reports of what these players are in the minor leagues. You could look at Fangraphs and what they predict, but, I mean, not everybody in that organization is going to be some stud. You might as well try to get something for some of these guys.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem is these over-the-hill players on long-term contracts. You know, these guys that have been great players come here and turn into Matt Kemp. And 10 years, it's like they're like throwing someone in the water that can't swim, just flopping around. I think they just have to get rid of A.J. Preller and start over.
Well, we'll see if they do that at the end of the year. It sounds like there's a lot of pressure on A.J. Preller to make the postseason. That's what a lot of people in Major League Baseball are saying. But, Brandon, I appreciate the phone call. Have a good Sunday.
Hey, you too.
Okay, if you want to weigh in, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. Everybody been commenting in the chat leading up to Padres baseball on the EcoWater SoCal Padres pregame show with Sam Levitt. I'm Braden Surprenant here on the Braden Surprenant Show. If you're new to the show, feel free to follow us on social media at B_SURP. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram, TikTok. Subscribe to my YouTube page at B_SURP. You can also follow us on the 97.3 The Fan accounts, as well as our YouTube page. I am live on there. A lot of people in the chat on there, too. So if you're driving around and you want to continue the conversation, fire us up on YouTube. A lot of people are talking about the Merrill Paul Skeens situation on there currently. I'm going to talk more about the second half of the season. And when you start looking at the second half of the season for Major League Baseball, ESPN does a pretty good job of breaking the teams into tiers, starting with what they call the Big Five. Not Scraby's Big Five, but the Big Five teams of the ones that are most likely to appear in a World Series matchup. Those teams would be the Phillies, the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Orioles, and the Guardians. I would imagine most of those teams will make the playoffs. In fact, all of them have a playoff odds north of 90%. The lowest on the list would be the Cleveland Guardians at 92.8%. All of them have an incredibly high chance of winning their own division, with the exception of the Yankees and the Orioles, and that's just because they play in the same division. And I think all those teams are making the playoffs. The expected final numbers for all these teams, they expect the Phillies to finish 101-61. They expect by the way, they already have a 100% chance of making the playoffs, according to these advanced analytics, if you will. 101-61, the record for the Phillies projected at this point in time in the second total after the second half. They expect the Yankees to win 97 games. They might win a couple less than that. Dodgers, they expect to win 95 games. Baltimore, they expect to win 95 games. And Cleveland, they expect to win 93 games. All those teams have playoff odds over 90%. Tier 2, according to ESPN.com, the Atlanta Braves, the Milwaukee Brewers, the Minnesota Twins, the Houston Astros, the Boston Red Sox, the Seattle Mariners, and the Kansas City Royals. That, according to ESPN.com, are the established contenders. So if you start putting this together of who would be in the playoffs, you'd have Atlanta, LA in the National League, and Milwaukee, and that's it. So they'd have the three division leaders in Atlanta already in the playoffs. And as for the American League, Yankees, Orioles, Guardians, Astros, Twins, Red Sox, Mariners. They have one extra team in there would be the Royals, and that would be where they're at with the American League. So that's your playoff field if you look at it from the perspective of who's expected to make the playoffs and who's not. Tier 3 is where the Padres fall into. That would be the National League's muddled wild card race. New York Mets at the top. They expect the Mets to win 84 games. So let's just assume that this is where they're at in terms of who's making the playoffs and who's not. They already had the Dodgers in, the Phillies in, the Braves and the Brewers in. So then they got the Mets, and then they got the Diamondbacks at 83 wins, and then they have the Padres at 83 wins. So right around 83 wins seems to be the money mark for the Padres to make the postseason. They got the Diamondbacks and the Padres tied at 83 wins and 79 losses. Before the season started, had the exact same thing, except I think the Padres were going to beat the Arizona Diamondbacks more times than lose. And as of right now, if I can find it very quickly, I can look at what the Padres are doing against the Arizona Diamondbacks. But I think that we're kind of around the 500 mark against Arizona. San Diego against Arizona is 5-5 in the 10 games. That means they got 3 games left against Arizona. They have to win 2 out of 3 from the Arizona Diamondbacks, and that is the last 3 games of the season. There could be a situation for the Padres this year where the last wild card spot will be between San Diego and Arizona, and a 3-game series between the two in the desert to determine who's the last wild card team. That's very interesting all of a sudden as this starts to develop into the second half. The San Diego Padres, Arizona Diamondbacks. Diamondbacks going into the second half, 49-48. Projected final record, 83-79. They got a 3% chance of winning the division, a 42% chance of making the playoffs, and a 1.2% chance of making a World Series. Or really making the NLCS. The San Diego Padres on the other side also going into the second half were 1 game above 500. Projected final record, 83-79. It's the same as the Diamondbacks. Division title odds, a little bit less than Arizona at 2.4%. Playoff odds, 37%. Championship odds, 1%. At full health, the Padres have the talent to emerge as the best wildcard team outside of Atlanta, although they have already done better than Atlanta this year. Against them, at least head-to-head. But the health of some of their best players is the biggest question heading into the second half. Tatis is nursing a stress reaction in his femur. Joe Musgrove is dealing with elbow inflammation. Neither has solidified timetable for return, and we do have an update on them when we come back from this break. And then there's Luis Arraez, who has been playing through a thumb injury that has greatly affected his hitting and forced him to sit out of the All-Star break. Again, this was written before the second half has started. If Arraez's thumb doesn't show improvement, he could be forced to the IL for a prolonged period. That was from Alden Gonzalez of ESPN. Looking at the standings, again, the Padres sit a game out of a wild card spot behind the New York Mets, and in front of the Padres before the Mets would be the Arizona Diamondbacks, who are tied for that spot, and the Pittsburgh Pirates, who are a half game in front of the San Diego Padres. Second half for San Diego is going to be interesting with the muddled NL wild card race. Included in that, they said again, the New York Mets, the Arizona Diamondbacks, the San Diego Padres, St. Louis Cardinals, San Francisco Giants, and the Pittsburgh Pirates. Teams playing out of contention, according to ESPN: Chicago Cubs, Cincinnati Reds, a bunch of American League teams, and the Washington Nationals. So here's where it stands. If you take what ESPN is predicting as word. Pulling up the standings, Phillies in, Dodgers in, Brewers in, Braves in. Teams competing for the final 2 wild card spots: Mets, Diamondbacks, Padres, Cardinals, Giants, Pirates. Mets, Diamondbacks, Padres, Cardinals, Giants, Pirates. 6 teams for 2 spots with 61 games to go in the rest of the regular season for the San Diego Padres. You're basically now playing a COVID season with a 6-team league. I don't think the Pirates are necessarily going to be in it down the stretch. I think a lot of people are really buying the Paul Skeens, Jared Jones debate, and we've seen the Pirates do this before. Padres still have to play the Pirates 6 times in the second half. I think they're a year away from being a really good team, and we've seen that before. I mean, the Arizona Diamondbacks last year were a year away of being a really good baseball team. And you know what they did? They went to the World Series. So I still think the Pirates are probably going to come back down to earth. Whether or not they do will remain to be seen. So I'm not necessarily worried about the Pirates. If I had to switch, I would probably say the Reds are coming up faster than the Pirates are. But, we'll see how that plays out. Again, the Pirates have Paul Skeens, and everybody in the media is obsessed with Paul Skeens. The San Francisco Giants, I think, are going to be a problem to deal with if you're the San Diego Padres. Division opponent. Have already had a better record against the Padres this season. The Giants do. It's by 1 game. The Giants are 4-3 against San Diego in the first 7 games. They still play each other 6 more times in the second half. The Padres need to make up some ground on the Giants in terms of season series records. Padres obviously have a better record than the Giants in the standings. St. Louis Cardinals, same thing. Another team the Padres dropped a early season series against that they're going to have to make up ground against. And then again, Cardinals currently in that top second wild card spot, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head. Yes, I'm not. They're a half game in front of the New York Mets in the second half. I think the Cardinals I think they have experience on their side, but it's whether or not those veterans can continue to play at a good level because a lot of those guys are getting older. Then you look at the San Diego Padres, the Arizona Diamondbacks, and the New York Mets. I don't really think the Mets are going to be around either. Mets have done great as of late. I mean, Grimace goes and throws out the first pitch, and they've been on a little bit of a tear, but I don't really see that playing out too far. So if I had to pick a team that I was most worried about in the wild card of keeping the Padres out of a wild card spot, it would probably be the Diamondbacks, the Giants. I know the Reds have lost 3 in a row, but I'm just telling you right now, I'd be worried about the Cincinnati Reds creeping up. More so than the Pittsburgh Pirates. But we'll see. Second half, chock full of some fun, and that will continue again with the game today against the Cleveland Guardians. We have updates on Fernando Tatis Jr. and Joe Musgrove. When we come back, we'll take your phone calls, and then we'll pass it along to Sam Levitt for the Ecowater SoCal Padres pregame show on San Diego's #1 station, 97.3 The Fan. Last segment of the Braden Surprenant show coming up next. This is San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Final segment of the Braden Surprenant Show as we get you ready for EcoWater SoCal Padres pregame show with Sam Levin and Padres baseball. Padres Guardians coming up at 10:40. Padres try to win the series against Cleveland before heading off to our nation's capital to take on the Washington Nationals. I'm Braden Surprenant. This is the Braden Surprenant Show. Thanks again for tuning in with us. Thanks for making our morning a part of yours. We really appreciate that. If you haven't done so already, give us a like on the YouTube page and be sure to share all of our stuff. Follow us on social media at @B_SURP. Follow me on Twitter, X, Instagram, TikTok, and subscribe to my YouTube page at B_SURP. We got another game today. Again, as I mentioned before, Padres Guardians. The lineup is out. We'll get to that in just a second. But first, let's get the update on Joe Musgrove and Fernando Tatis Jr. that AJ Cassaville had a couple of days ago. And when talking about these two, they gained traction towards a return, and adding these two pieces would be major for any team in Major League Baseball via the deadline. And the Padres getting these guys would be like adding two players at the deadline without really costing anything because you're already paying for these guys. During the All-Star break, Padres got positive news on the recoveries of both Tatis with his right femoral stress reaction and Joe Musgrove with right elbow inflammation. Tatis, who has been sidelined since late June, underwent an MRI. The stress reaction hasn't entirely healed, according to manager Mike Shildt, but the MRI results were encouraging enough that Fernando Tatis Jr. has resumed some baseball activity. That's good news, Padres fans. They wanted to make sure that this bone was completely healed before he was allowed to do anything. So the fact that he's able to start doing baseball activities is great. That is a good sign so far. The MRI was favorable, according to Mike Shildt. It's still there, the actual stress reaction, but a lot of the swelling and the fluid is pretty well gone. That is obviously a positive, so he's able to swing the bat and do some light lower half exercises. Mike Shildt noted that Tatis would undergo further imaging in the near future. Once the stress reaction has healed, Tatis' full ramp-up will begin, and Mike Shildt said he doesn't anticipate Tatis needing much time to build back to game shape, which is also good news because when you start losing, when you don't play and you sit on the shelf for a little bit, you got to get back up to game speed. There's a difference between being in shape and being in game shape for a lot of different sports. I mean, you can sit there and lift weights all you want and get into shape and conditioning and everything like that, but there's a difference playing in games, in real games, especially at a high level like Major League Baseball. As for Joe Musgrove, who hasn't pitched since May because of elbow inflammation and tricep tendinitis caused by a bone spur, he threw his first bullpen session on Wednesday at Petco Park before accompanying the team to Cleveland. Good news. He's with the team on the road, which is great. And he threw a bullpen the other day. Also outstanding. Musgrove said his bullpen was mostly fastballs, though he plans to incorporate breaking pitches over the course of his next few bullpen sessions, which will take place during the Padres' three-city trip through Cleveland, which is finishing today, Washington, and Baltimore. This is Musgrove's second sit on the injured list this season with the same injury. His first was an abbreviated one and didn't allow his elbow enough time to heal. This time, Musgrove received a PRP injection and took nearly a month away from throwing. He says he hasn't felt any lingering issues in his buildup. Season clearly hasn't gone according to plan for Musgrove, who posted a 5.66 ERA in 10 starts amid the injuries. But if he can return in late August for the Padres' postseason push, that still affords him time to make a difference. Obviously, I never want to be on the IL, Musgrove said. You always try to manage it, but the decision to go on the IL was ultimately looking at where I could be the most impactful this season, and that's down the stretch. Indeed, a healthy Musgrove and Tatis would go a long way toward improving the Padres' chances of reaching the postseason and doing damage once they get there. Again, the article according to AJ Cassaville. Mike Schultz says that's huge. You guys get like that. I feel pretty good about where we are relative to having injuries. Look, every club's banged up. Make no excuses, but let's not kid ourselves. We get Toddy and Joe back. That's a big lift for this club. It is going to be a big lift for that club, if they're able to get those guys back. I think Fernando's going to come back eventually. Based on the most recent news, it sounds like things are progressing really well. And with that, they're going to get a healthy Fernando Tatis Jr., at least as close to healthy as possible, which would be a major spark in this lineup. And it really lengthens that lineup a little bit more. And it really encapsulates a complete all-star outfield with Jackson Merrill and Jurickson Profar. And adding him back to the lineup pushes a couple of guys down, pushes a couple of guys to the bench. Now all of a sudden you got Solano and Peralta coming off the bench, and they've been more than serviceable this year for the Padres. Great pickups by A.J. Preller, getting some veterans. You move some veterans to the bench. You move some, other players that have been there and done that before to the bench instead of relying on some pieces that you shouldn't be relying on late in the game. That's going to be a major upgrade for the San Diego Padres, especially with Toddy. If Joe can come back and be able to contribute, that would be huge for the Padres too, because Joe can go out there and eat some innings and give you some good pitches. And you got to get him back to form. I mean, he just has not been right the entire year. But that's the latest update on Joe and on Fernando. We're going to get to the Padres lineup in just a second. Want to get back to your phone calls. Let's go out to Tijuana, where Lynn's standing by. Lynn, what's going on?
Coach, Coach. How you doing, Braden?
I'm doing great, Lynn.
I got a question on what happened to Coach and you. You two guys are the greatest.
Well, it was fun, but there's nothing I could say about that. That was something that happened earlier in the year. We addressed it. The company addressed it. Still have a good relationship with Coach. I have good relationships with everybody I work with, and that had nothing to do with me, and everything to do with other stuff. And that's in the past now, and nothing more we can really say on that. But let's get to the Padres lineup for today as they take on the Cleveland Guardians. Getting you ready for the EcoWater SoCal Padres pregame show with Sam Levitt. Padres lineup today. Batting leadoff and playing first base is Luis Ariz. Batting second and in left field, Jurickson Profar. Jake Cronenworth will bat third and play second base. Manny Machado batting fourth and playing third base. Batting fifth and DHing today, Xander Bogaerts. Batting sixth and in center field is Jackson Merrill. Batting seventh and in right field, David Peralta. Batting eighth and at shortstop is Hassan Kim. And catching Michael King today and batting ninth is Kyle Higashioka. It's a pretty good lineup today on a Sunday for the Padres as they try to get some guys back and playing. Again, Xander Bogaerts, I think, has to have a pretty good second half for this Padres team. They spent a lot of money in Xander to have him here, and I think he's starting to turn it around a little bit here for the Padres. He's done pretty good since coming back from injury in his last couple of games. He has now got his average up, thank goodness, to above 230. And if we look at the last couple of box scores, he's had some good knocks. I mean, even in his first game back, he looks like he's hitting the ball a lot better, and the Padres could really use him coming up in the second half of the season. I mean, the addition of Fernando is huge, but if they could get Bogaerts back on track, again, it just really lengthens the lineup. All of a sudden, you get Fernando back in the lineup instead of Peralta. Move him closer to the top of the batting order. You move guys back down, and now all of a sudden, Xander Bogaerts is your sixth batter, and Jackson Merrill is your seventh. If Jackson Merrill ideally would be batting 8 or 9 on a lot of contending teams. That's not a knock on Jackson Merrill, but that's just how good some of these teams are in Major League Baseball. Move some of the guys back down in the order. And I think Jackson Merrill is thriving at the lower end of the batting order, letting the kid do his thing. Just let him feel confident and do his thing. I know he's had a rough month of July, but near the bottom of the order, let him be a rookie, let him do his thing, get him some good pitches. Kyle Higashioka has been a great backup catcher. Great backup catcher. I mean, he's played his way into potentially being a starting catcher, but he has been a great addition to this Padres team for what he is for the team. I mean, getting more than 10 pumps out of him is great. So let's see what happens with that with the San Diego Padres. It sounds like the latest news from Kevin Acee. It sounds like Johnny Brito had a little bit of a setback, if I'm not mistaken. And we'll try to get as much of that to you as possible. Johnny Brito was being looked at to potentially start Saturday's game for the Padres, and he went down to play in the minor leagues, and it looks like, according to the article here, Johnny Brito, who's sent down to AAA to get stretched out and work on a splitter, is being looked at to start Saturday. However, he did not make his scheduled start for El Paso a couple nights ago due to discomfort in his forearm, so his availability will be somewhat dependent on his health. Sam Levitt will have more on that during the Padres, EcoWater SoCal Padres pregame show. That'll do it for me. I'm Braden Surprenant. This has been the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each every Sunday morning on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan.